Jalen squinted through the haze of neon and dust, the smell of fried protein cubes and ozone tangling in his nostrils. The bazaar on Zephorus' surface moon was chaos incarnate. Hover carts wobbling on antigrav pads, traders yelling in a dozen languages, and the occasional stray drone crashing spectacularly into the piles of alien tech. He shuffled along, trying to look inconspicuous in his worn flight jacket, which smelled faintly of burnt circuits and last week's misadventures. Not that looking inconspicuous mattered, his wallet was as empty as a nebula core. He rounded a corner and froze. A crowd had gathered around a cage that glimmered with a faint blue shimmer like it was barely holding itself together. Inside was her. She wasn't human, yet she was a familiar silhouette with long, elegant ears that twitched with subtle emotion, eyes glinting gold under the flickering lights. Her hair, dark and streaked with strange silver highlights, fell in sharp contrast to the pale, almost luminescent skin that made her seem like she had walked straight out of some old Earth myth, only wrong enough to be dangerous. "What's the price?" someone muttered. The crowd leaned closer, everyone eager to hear the numbers, not noticing that the cage seemed to hum in protest, as though it hated the very idea of being bought. Jalen's stomach did a somersault. He had no credits. Zero. Nada. The only thing of value he had on him was a slightly dented hover knife, a pack of dehydrated noodles that tasted like recycled asteroid dust, and an old holocom pass he'd stolen from a bartender back on Palace 7. Still, he stepped forward, compelled by an impulse that made zero sense. The alien girl, her name, he would later learn, was Leora, looked at him with the faintest tilt of her head, long ears arching like question marks. "You planning to buy me, human?" she asked, her voice smooth, melodic, but carrying a sharp edge that could slice through steel if necessary. I might be," Jalen said, realizing immediately how absurd he sounded. "Maybe. Depends, are you negotiable?" The crowd snickered. One vendor mumbled something about humans being hopeless. Leora rolled her eyes, the corners twitching, and muttered in a language Jalen didn't recognize, probably cursing him elegantly. The auctioneer, a rotund, three-eyed creature with too many tentacles, cleared his throat. "Next bidder, hurry, the price rises by quantum increments every cycle." He waved a claw toward Jalen. "Yes, you flapping meat sack." Jalen swallowed. Quantum increments were a nightmare for anyone without credits, but the urge to free her was stronger than reason. He pulled out his meager credit chips and dumped them in the transaction tray. Nothing. His balance blinked red. He cursed under his breath. Then, on a wild gamble, he pressed every single chip he had, including the emergency credit he was saving for actual food. The cage clicked. The hum shifted. Leora's long ears twitched, a hint of amusement curling her features. "You do know you've just spent your life savings on me, right?" "Yeah," Jalen said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I figured you're probably worth it." Leora's laugh was soft but cutting, the kind that made you aware she knew every flaw you had in an instant. "You're insane." She paused, "and maybe lucky?" She bared sharp canines in a mock smile. "Or maybe I'll just eat you first and then see about escape plans." The crowd erupted in laughter, some clapping, some throwing garbage, because interstellar markets always got excited by a combination of absurdity and chaos. Jalen tried to look dignified but realized he looked like a starving starship mechanic who had just made the most reckless decision of his life. Once the transaction completed, the cage doors hissed open. Leora stepped out, stretching in a way that made her seem both dangerous and elegant, her long ears flicking at the lights like twin sensors. She examined him critically. "You know, most humans buy slaves or gadgets, not wild alien women with a grudge against half the galaxy." I'm a risk-taker," Jalen offered weakly. He immediately regretted it. She smirked. "Risk-taker or idiot," she said. "I'll decide later." She tilted her head. "By the way, your spaceship better not smell like burnt noodles. If it does, we're renegotiating my freedom." They walked toward the edge of the bazaar, weaving through the chaos. Vendors shouted, drones beeped warnings, and Jalen realized he had no plan beyond spending every credit he had. Leora's ears flicked with amusement as she watched him stumble over a pile of hover crates. "So, Jalen said, rubbing a bruised shin, "how does this whole freedom thing work? I mean, do we just walk out or—" "Walk out?" Leora laughed, the sound sharp and musical. "Human, do you see those security drones? Those guards with plasma whips? That hovering meat grinder over there? She pointed at a device that looked like a fusion of a blender and a sentient tank. We'll need more than walking out, but don't worry, I have plans. Mostly involving explosions and sarcastic insults. Jalen blinked. Explosions are good, I'm great with explosions, not so much with planning. Leora's ears twitched. I can tell, but that's fine, you'll make a funny corpse. She punched him lightly in the arm, kidding mostly. By the time they reached the edge of the bazaar, the twin suns were dipping below the jagged horizon, casting everything in a strange amber glow that made the alien structures look almost friendly. Jalen was exhausted, broke, and completely terrified. Yet as he glanced at Leora, he realized he didn't care. Somehow, spending everything to free a dangerous, sarcastic alien woman felt like the right kind of chaos, the kind that made life worth living, or at least worth running from. Their first steps into the wider galaxy were tentative but electric. A minor hovercar chase ensued almost immediately because Jalen had accidentally bumped into the mayor's anti-grav scooter, sending it careening into a pile of nanobot-infested crates. Leora laughed, her ears flicking in pure amusement. You know, she said as they ducked behind a blinking supply kiosk, humans are terrible at buying alien women, but you're entertaining. I'll take that as a compliment, Jalen said, catching his breath and trying not to notice the faint sparks flying off the crates nearby. So, what now? She grinned, a sharp glint in her golden eyes. Now we survive human. And maybe, just maybe, teach the galaxy that buying someone with all their money is way cheaper than dealing with their wrath later. The stars above Zephorus twinkled like mischief incarnate, and Jalen couldn't help but feel that, despite imminent danger, reckless decisions, and absurd amounts of sarcasm, he might have just stumbled into the strangest adventure of his life. Jalen gripped the pilot's console with hands that were trembling partly from fear and partly from the absurdity of the situation. The stolen spacecraft groaned beneath them like an old warhorse complaining about early morning chores, warning lights flickering in patterns that seemed designed to induce panic. Leora leaned against the navigation panel, one leg draped casually over the console, long ears twitching as she observed the blinking chaos. You really shouldn't touch that red button, she said, voice melodic but sharp, unless you want to turn this ship into a very expensive fireball. I wasn't going to press it, Jalen said, though his hand hovered suspiciously close. It just looked shiny. Leora rolled her eyes, ears flicking in synchronized annoyance. Humans have a way of thinking shiny equals important. I've seen nebula worms with more strategic thinking than you. She leaned closer, her gold eyes glinting, and added, Don't make me set you on autopilot and leave you to flirt with the nearest asteroid belt. Jalen swallowed and forced a laugh. Flirting with asteroids, yeah, sounds like a dream date. He tapped a few more buttons, trying to regain some sense of control, though each beep seemed to announce the imminent doom of everyone on board. Leora's ears twitched as if laughing without making a sound, and she pushed off the console, landing gracefully on her feet. We need a plan, she said, not wiggle around hoping the ship survives. A real plan. One that doesn't involve you accidentally vaporizing us into cosmic confetti. He stared at her. Right plan, I have no plan. Her laugh was soft, teasing, almost musical. That figures, humans are charmingly hopeless. She crouched to examine the ship's readouts, tapping a few controls with long, precise fingers. Okay, we're low on fuel, the cargo bay door is stuck, and the hyperdrive may or may not implode if you sneeze too hard. Standard Zephorus grade malfunction, but we can manage if you don't touch anything else that looks shiny. Jalen gave a mock salute. Yes, Captain Sarcastic, lead the way. They took off into the void, the stars stretching in long, neon streaks as the ship jumped into sublight speed. Outside the viewport, clusters of asteroids drifted lazily, though Jalen could feel every wobble of the ship as if the vacuum itself were mocking his piloting skills. Leora pointed to one particularly large rock that was wobbling erratically. That's not just an asteroid, that's a Smeltorian mining drone. They're like giant floating Swiss cheese with attitude. Avoid it. I'm avoiding it, Jalen said, twisting the controls, and instantly sent the ship spinning sideways. Leora hissed, ears flattening. Careful, you just almost gave it a love tap from the wrong end of the ship. I did it, a love tap. Jalen sputtered. You didn't, but if you keep maneuvering like a drunken comet, we will both die and I will haunt your ancestors. Jalen could only gape as she smirked, clearly enjoying the terror he was trying to hide behind bravado. He had no choice but to admit that having an alien woman who looked impossibly elegant and deadly as his sarcastic co-pilot made life both terrifying and fascinating. Their first stop was a derelict space station orbiting a dying sun. The station was a chaotic maze of flickering corridors, collapsed walkways, and anti-grav lifts that groaned ominously with every step. As they clumsily docked the ship, Jalen tripped over a loose panel, sending sparks flying. Leora caught his arm with surprising strength. If you're going to trip over every loose panel in the galaxy, at least do it somewhere with medical kits nearby. I'm getting better, he mumbled. She snorted. You're getting louder. Inside, they navigated through rusted corridors, dodging rogue maintenance bots whose programming had clearly degraded into passive-aggressive attitudes. One little bot kept insisting they take a number while shooting tiny laser warnings whenever Jalen moved too fast. Leora tapped it with a boot, and it spun helplessly in midair, whining about labor regulations in a language Jalen couldn't begin to understand. I think it's begging for mercy, he whispered. Or arguing about its union benefits, Leora replied, stepping over a melted conduit. Either way, amusing. They found an old storage bay and hid their ship behind a pile of crates. Leora crouched beside him. Okay, human, time for truth. Do you really know what you're doing, or are you improvising on the fly? I'm improvising, Jalen admitted. Exactly what I expected, she said, ears flicking. Which is why you're alive and amusing at the same time. Don't get used to that combination. Hours passed as they patched systems, scavenged supplies, and debated their next move. Leora demonstrated her skills in alien combat techniques, flipping gracefully over crumbling walls and disabling ancient turrets that humans weren't even supposed to touch. Jalen attempted to mimic her moves, resulting in a spectacularly loud crash into a storage crate full of anti-grav grenades. Leora simply shook her head, ears twitching with amusement, and muttered, "If laughter could kill, I'd be dead by now." At one point, they shared a makeshift meal of recycled protein cubes that tasted vaguely of charcoal and mystery chemicals. Jalen tried to make conversation. So, do all alien women fight like you? She raised an eyebrow, golden eyes glinting. Depends. Some prefer sarcasm over stabbing, others like sarcasm and stabbing. I happen to enjoy a balanced lifestyle. She flicked a cube at him. Catch. He did barely. It hit his forehead and bounced onto the floor. Balanced lifestyle, he muttered. Leora laughed, ears flicking, and leaned back. Yes, very balanced. The night passed under a dim, flickering artificial sun in the station's abandoned dome. Jalen watched Leora move about with effortless grace, realizing that he had spent every credit he had, risked his life, and thrown himself into a situation he barely understood. And yet, he wouldn't have changed a thing. She looked at him occasionally, sharp and teasing, but something in her gaze softened when she thought he wasn't noticing. As they prepped for the next leg of their journey, through an asteroid belt rumored to be crawling with mercenaries and sentient space debris, Jalen felt a strange surge of determination. Somehow, being broke, terrified, and entirely outmatched felt manageable. At least when Leora was there to mock him, fight alongside him, and occasionally save his clumsy human ass. He grinned, shaking his head. I don't even know where I'm going, he said, voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's core. Leora's ears twitched. Doesn't matter, the galaxy is a big, ridiculous place, we'll survive it. Mostly by luck, some skill, and me making sarcastic commentary. And explosions? Jalen asked hopefully. And explosions, she confirmed, smirking. Lots of explosions, you'll be thrilled or die trying, either way fun. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched into streaks of light as they engaged the hyperdrive. And for the first time since he had spent every credit to buy her freedom, Jalen felt a rush of something wild and dangerous. Hope, fear, and an absurd thrill all mixed into one perfect cosmic cocktail. The galaxy was vast, unforgiving, and utterly ridiculous. And somehow he thought it might just be enough for both of them to survive. The space station loomed like a jagged crown suspended over a violet nebula, spinning lazily as if daring anyone to approach. Jalen wiped sweat from his brow, though in zero gravity it barely mattered, and peered at the schematics projected in front of him. Every sensor blip, every turret position, every patrolling guard drone had been memorized thanks to hours of crawling through maintenance shafts, dodging sentient cleaning bots and Leora's occasional sarcastic guidance. "You know," she said, brushing dust off her dark hair and adjusting the edge of a plasma blade, "you could try reading the instructions instead of staring at them like a confused sandworm." "I'm thinking," Jalen protested, though even he knew it sounded weak. "Strategizing." "Sure," she said, ears flicking in amusement. "If by strategizing you mean panicking while looking heroic, then yes, very strategizing." The central hub of the syndicate, the reason Leora had been enslaved in the first place, was a crystalline labyrinth, glowing faintly with shifting lights that made the walls appear to ripple. Security cameras, motion sensors, and holographic traps blinked in patterns that could induce a headache in anyone not used to quantum detection systems. Jalen swallowed. "So, walk straight through, or maybe hug the walls." "Neither," Leora said with a grin. "We improvise. Improvisation is half my charm, the other half blindingly lethal combat skills and sarcasm." She twirled a small blade between her fingers. "Mostly sarcasm." Jalen glanced at her, feeling the weight of his own ineptitude. He had spent every credit he had to buy her freedom, and now here they were, facing an entire syndicate armed to the teeth and apparently fond of dramatic entrances. Still, a strange confidence had taken root inside him. He wasn't just a human fumbling through the galaxy anymore. He was someone who had risked everything for loyalty, for love, for a cause larger than himself. And maybe, he thought, he had a hint of charm hidden under the chaos. They slipped inside the labyrinth, shadows sliding along crystalline walls, their reflections fracturing into 100 distorted images. Jalen accidentally triggered a motion sensor by sneezing, and Leora smacked him lightly on the shoulder. "Really? In a combat zone?" "It was a tactical sneeze," he muttered. "Sure," she said, her ears twitching with mock disbelief. "Very tactical. We'll tell the bodies you died heroically, not embarrassingly." They dodged turret fire with a combination of awkward maneuvers and luck that Jalen was beginning to think might be sentient. Leora moved with fluid precision, disarming guards with a flick of her blade, her long ears brushing the air like sensors attuned to danger. Jalen tried to follow, occasionally colliding with walls, crates, or stray machinery, but Leora never scolded him. Instead, she adapted, using his blunders to their advantage. A falling security panel knocked out a laser grid, and she quipped, "Congratulations, you're a walking, stumbling weapon of mass assistance." The deeper they went, the more absurd the station became. One corridor was flooded with what appeared to be semi-sentient goo, and a robot with 3 heads insisted on arguing about citizenship requirements while trying to zap them. Leora casually tossed a plasma grenade at it, and the robot exploded into harmless sparks, still muttering indignantly as it fell apart. Jalen blinked. "I think we just won." "Sometimes victory smells like fried circuits," she said, ears twitching. "Get used to it." They reached the inner sanctum where the syndicate leaders awaited, humanoid but with grotesque augmentations, heads like floating teapots, limbs that didn't quite match, and voices that dripped with arrogance. "So the human bought the wild alien," one croaked, tentacles twitching. "You risk everything for a pet, how quaint." Leora's smirk was sharp, her golden eyes narrowing. "I'm not a pet, I'm the problem you didn't expect. And you should have kept me caged." She lunged, blades flashing, moving with deadly grace. Jalen followed, less graceful but armed with improvised gadgets scavenged from the station, and together they wove chaos through the crystalline hall. The fight was equal parts terrifying and absurd. Turrets overloaded, walls shimmered and cracked under laser fire, and the leaders' attempts at monologues were interrupted by a series of unfortunate, self-inflicted mechanical failures. Jalen improvised a series of distractions. He threw a container of anti-grav gel into a laser array, accidentally sending one of the syndicate's teapot-headed leaders spinning into a wall, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Leora laughed at him. Her laughter, bright, teasing, alive, was a strange anchor amidst the chaos. Hours or minutes, time lost all meaning in the crystalline maze. Later, the leaders were incapacitated, the security systems overloaded, and the station itself seemed to groan in resignation. Jalen, bruised, battered, but remarkably alive, slumped against a wall, watching Leora as she deactivated the final traps. "We did it," he said, voice hoarse, a grin tugging at his lips. "We did," she confirmed, leaning against him lightly. Mostly because I'm awesome and you're, well, mostly harmless when you don't touch shiny buttons. He laughed, the sound raw with relief. I've learned a lot, you know. About loyalty, courage, about spending every credit on the right person. Leora tilted her head, ears twitching in amusement. You learn that without becoming completely insufferable. That's progress. Outside, the nebula stretched in hues of violet and gold, the remnants of the station glowing softly as they floated in orbit. Jalen and Leora gazed at the stars, exhausted but alive. He realized that he had changed. He was no longer just a human stumbling through the galaxy, blindly risking what little he had. He had risked it all for something meaningful, and it had transformed him. Fear was still there, of course, but tempered with humor, courage, and a sense of purpose he had never known. So, he said, nudging her lightly, what now? Do we go back, hide, retire somewhere boring? She laughed, the sound tinkling in zero gravity. Boring is not our style. I vote we keep moving, keep surviving, and maybe, just maybe, start dismantling the galaxy's idiotic hierarchies, one sarcastic insult and well-timed explosion at a